Hello, Australia. All right. So thank you, John, and to the MAV for inviting me here. This is my first time to Australia. So thank you to all of you for coming from all parts of Australia so I can meet the entire country today. I appreciate that. Just a few reflections on some of the points this morning. And there was, John made some images about putting out fires and keeping your head above water. And I guess first I just want to commemorate you for doing those things. Those are keeping your head above water and putting out fires are very important tasks for local government, and not easy things to do. I also want to concur though with John and with Rowena about the importance of cooperation, not just in putting out fires and keeping your heads above water, but also taking time to stop and look ahead, look around to figure out what we can be doing strategically. I don't imagine, I'm not going to make too many predictions, but I can expect that we will always be putting out fires and always working hard to be keeping our head above waters, but it doesn't mean we can't also be trying to figure out how to be doing things differently as we move forward. I want to avoid making any predictions about the future except for one, that I think our future is becoming harder and harder to predict, that we live in a highly indeterminate world, that we have more and more ability with big data and modeling and computers to imagine different alternative futures and probabilities for those futures, but we have less and less capability to really know for sure what is going to be happening. The pace of change is becoming so quick in some areas that all we can really do is to try and manage our systems and ourselves within that fast-changing world, with or without, and only having some, and paying attention to what the different possible future alternatives are, and not trying to predict just what it is going to be, but how to manage ourselves in that world. Also, just on the notion of problems, that there are lots of big problems that have been talked about, and I think that the majority of them are not problems to be solved, but dilemmas that need to be managed, that they're not going to go away. Some of them are going to get much worse. There is no technological solution or policy solution, but they are just simply the job of government, of society, of all of us to manage those things as dilemmas. And our role as leaders very much to work with our communities to not necessarily solve the problems or make the decisions that will solve the problems as we might have done in one day or like to imagine that we did, but simply to play a leadership role, a convening role, a collaborative role, to marshal whatever resources the community has, individuals have, to deal with those dilemmas. So I'm going to talk about that a little bit in the frame of citizen engagement within the context first, but just put it within the context of open government. The open government is usually thought of as having three pieces. There's transparency, accountability, and public engagement. Transparency has a lot to do with open data, making data available to the public via data portals, APIs, all sorts, and letting people access that data and do what they want with that data. A lot of attention in open government has been placed on transparency, accountability, open data, with very much less so currently put on public engagement, or at least the roles that I think public engagement can play around policy setting, implementation, and so forth. I get invited to a lot of open government conferences. So we need someone to come and talk more about the public engagement piece of open government because we're not really doing it and nobody's paying enough attention to it. I go to the conferences and I find that they don't listen to me a lot. That there is a real risk, or there is a real legitimate criticism right now that open data has become sort of synonymous with open government. But I'm also noticing sort of a growing recognition of that a lot of people who are very excited about open data, transparency, believing that new technologies were going to make a big difference, are beginning to kind of pause and say, wow, we're not necessarily yet seeing the change, or there are a lot of criticism of governments doing open washing, that they are making a lot of data available and then believing that they have done their job as far as open government goes. So I'm glad to be here to talk a little bit about the public engagement piece. So I'm not going to be talking about open data or accountability to that. Just open government has become a real international movement. Australia's federal government created an open government initiative in 2010. The United States, along with Brazil and about 5 other countries, created the International Open Government Partnership. There's now about 50 countries that are part of that. Australia is not one of them. Of course, information transparency, of course, has to do with Freedom of Information Act, open data, transparency around procurement, budget, policy making. Accountability has a lot to do with anti-corruption mechanisms. Public engagement, the engaging stakeholders in decision making and implementation. So why engage the public? I was intrigued by the mouse wheel on the program for today. I'm not going to claim that public engagement is going to make your life any easier. In fact, in some cases, it's going to make your life more difficult, if it hasn't already. But I do believe that it is a necessary part for a healthy democracy and a more functional democracy and government, and has a lot of potential to help us manage a lot of the dilemmas that we are now confronting. It can help to build a stronger support. A lot of the dilemmas that we are dealing with, the choices that we have to make are not politically popular, and so engaging citizens more closely in the process can help build public support for the actions that need to be taken through educating them about the issues, and helping them understand the challenges that councils like yourselves are dealing with. And also very much, I think, in Simon's and others, about the public themselves becoming much more a part of the solution. And then finally, of course, I believe that engaging the public can lead to better decisions, gaining new insight, new options, than if you were not involving more people. So I'm going to organize the conversation into these 6 topics. The first 4 are sort of principles of public engagement, linking to decision makers, demographic diversity, informed participation, and facilitated deliberation, and then just talking about some of the technological tools, in-person meeting technology, and online. So linking to decision making, there's 2 traditional ways to influence decision making. People can, individuals and groups can organize and advocate for a particular outcome from government, or they can go to the ballot box to elect officials that will be supportive of their agendas. At AmericaSpeaks, what we advocate for is for government officials, decision makers, to take a much more proactive, to take the lead around engaging citizens in decision making. So, to be very honest and transparent with the public about what are the decisions that you are trying to make, and what is the input that would be helpful to you, to let them know, understand what decisions have already been made, and looking at the decisions that do need to be made, what are the feasible policy options, both politically, financially, practically. I think too often I work with local government officials, and they want to just go out and they want to ask people, what do you want from your local government? And it creates expectations that cannot be fulfilled. That you need to be honest with them about the issues, the choices, and have them and get their input as such. So in the state of California in 2007, then Republican governor, you may have seen some of his movies, and the Democratic legislature were very committed to passing substantial health care reform to provide universal coverage, though the Republican governor would not support a single-payer system, even though there was a lot of popular support for it. So we worked very closely with the Democratic legislature and the Republican governor to to detail a lot of the policy options that they were considering for healthcare reform and getting dramatic input, getting input on those. We received, as the convener for that, we received a lot of criticism because advocates wanted to know why a single-payer system was not, was not on the process of support. But so again, it's for decision makers to take the initiative to lay out on the table what are the decisions that they are trying to make, and soliciting the input that they need to help them with those decisions. Of course, to increase the legitimacy and the accuracy of the process, it is necessary to have the demographics, the diversity of the community involved in the process. In the United States, we always, in all of our efforts, we work very hard to make sure that we have good representation across age, race, income, geography, in some cases political party ideology. People often ask us, how do you engage those audiences, typically the low-income United States Latino groups that are very difficult to involve? And there's no simple answer. The answer that the hard to reach are indeed very hard to reach. We work very hard to work with community leaders, sort of the grass tops. People have heard about grassroots. Those people who are church leaders, organization leaders, who have some standing and respectability within the community, that we can work with them closely to help them get their constituency involved in the process. We cannot, as government officials or a consulting group, we cannot expect to go directly to the citizens, but we need to reach out to people that are trusted leaders within the community. We track our participation very closely. In our meetings, we use the little e-voting, voting technology to identify who's in the room and how well we're doing with the demographics. We often, in our bigger meetings, will do a lot of advanced registration so we know what groups are not necessarily as involved in the process, and shift our resources to engage them. This is, again, one of those not easy to do, but I feel it's a necessary step to ensure good participation and greater chance for successful follow-through. So, for example, we worked in New Orleans after Hurricane Katrina. It was over a year after the hurricanes hit. So it was late 2006, and they had still not passed sort of a comprehensive plan, recovery plan, that was needed to release federal funds. And there had been several failed efforts. They were not winning the support of the city council members, and so we're not moving forward. They were on their third or fourth effort in late 2006. They convened the first of 3 citywide meetings, and New Orleans population before Hurricane Katrina was majority African American, majority low income, and this first meeting they had was over 100 people. It was majority very wealthy, majority white. Everybody at the meeting was very supportive of the plan, but it was not representative of the community. The city council's members were threatening to, again, not support it. So the following 2 meetings, we got involved. We actually had to, at this time, over a year, there were still thousands of people, tens of thousands of people displaced from New Orleans, living in different cities across the country, from Dallas to Atlanta, and we went to all those different cities, engaged several thousand people around the Unified New Orleans Plan, and and sort of reversed the tables back to engaging over 50% low income, 70% African American populations in the process, and built the political support needed to move forward on the plan that was needed to release the federal funds. The third principle is informed participation, and this is an area where I see a lot of mistakes in open government. They recognize that the citizens need lots of information in order to understand. They want residents to understand the problems, but then they either don't provide them any information, or they tend to overload them with information. It's very important to figure out how to frame these issues, how to position these issues, so that they could be understood and accessed by a larger number of citizens. Presenting the feasible options, what are the pros and cons for each options, doing these with very well-written, accessible materials, using videos. It's getting cheaper and cheaper to produce high-quality videos to present information online or in meetings. So one example here is in Port Phillips Speaks. The city of Port Phillips was doing some community planning, and this was in 2007, around a variety of issues, parking, community development, services, and others. And for each of those topic issues, they did a very good job in presenting, what are some of what's some of the background information around the parking challenges that the community is dealing with, and then about just very nicely laid out across about 2 pages of 7 different options and what are the pros and cons and fairly specific policy ideas. Reduce on-site car parking for local shops, or increasing the cost of additional permits for households with multiple cars and so forth. So but then providing some real good pros and cons to help people give meaningful input on those tools. A real underutilized resource in lots of by local government is the role of facilitation. In terms of what facilitators, neutral conveners can do to help a citizen participation process, we're very fortunate in the United States at AmericaSpeaks. We have a network of thousands of people whose expertise is facilitation, who are more often than not willing to volunteer their time to give to their community to help support a public participation process. And it allows the elected officials, council members, decision makers to participate as leaders, to champion the ideas that they support, to listen to the community, to the participants, and not be responsible for managing the process, for making sure that everyone's getting fair, that everyone's getting the chance to be heard, or that nobody's dominating the conversation. Just like lots of policy experts have expertise in their areas of field, facilitators have expertise in process, and in our meetings, in our efforts, we establish ground rules, we create facilitator guides, to try and make as effective and helpful for everybody. So we're talking about in-person meeting technology. AmericaSpeaks is most known for doing these large-scale town meetings, in-person, face-to-face, using meeting technologies to facilitate the process. When I started doing this back in 2001, keypad polling, the keypads were about as big as my face. They cost about $200 US each. And now in 2007, they started about the size of a credit card, and now they probably cost $30 or $40 each. So local governments across the US, and I'm sure elsewhere, have bought systems like these. They're incredibly easy to use. They give everyone the chance to weigh in on decisions anonymously. They're fun just as a way to change. It's a fun technology. People enjoy doing it. And now there's technologies where you don't even need any hardware. People can use their smartphones or text messaging to participate. Poll Everywhere is a very affordable online polling system that we have used on a couple of occasions. So these are becoming very common. Groupware computers is a much less common technology. Groupware computers is kind of an old-fashioned name from the 80s that we haven't been able to come up with a better name yet. But it's maybe we need some sort of cloud name. It essentially works to capture, the keypad polling is very good at gathering quantitative data from all the participants. The groupware computers very good at capturing and summarizing the qualitative data from all of the conversations that you might be having in a public meeting, especially a larger public meeting. So through these facilitated discussions, as people are talking, they're discussing their ideas and submitting their best ideas into a laptop computer, and that laptop computer is networked with all the others, and there's a group in the room in the lower left corner that we call the theme team, and they are sitting there reading all the ideas coming in from all the table discussions that are occurring in real time and identifying what are the most common themes and building the PowerPoint slide to say, here's what we hear everybody saying, and then projecting those up on the screen for everybody else. And then you can grab the keypads and people can prioritize. Sort of creates this fast cycle feedback where you can, and a highly transparent process where it's very clear what people are saying. They have clear visibility of what the record of the meeting is. They don't have to wait for the flip charts or the notes to be transcribed and reported several weeks later. And it allows each conversation to build on the previous conversation. I just put this slide in here. When I worked more with local government, I haven't done this a lot lately, but there's a lot of really great GIS planning tools, Community Biz Index, that really are very helpful for getting citizens to better understand some of the challenges and opportunities around land use planning. A lot of the things that local government deals with are place-based, and these tools just help people to really understand some of the implications of some of the choices and what they might be looking for. Crowdsourcing is a popular term in online technologies, where we talked about crowdfunding. And so I just wanted to make kind of a reference here. We just did a town meeting in Flint, Michigan. It was one of a larger meeting with 400 participants spending 4 hours together. We had about 50 volunteers helping run the meeting, about 2,000 hours of community service. There were sitting at 40 tables in small group discussion. What we generated from the data that was captured into the Grouper computers, generated 43,000 words of feedback, and for the keypad polling equipment, over 8,000 data points from the keypad polling. That's with all the different cross-tabulation and so forth that you can do between different questions. So it just sort of, it's not an insignificant effort, not an insignificant amount of resources that went into this meeting, but it was a tremendously very powerful meeting for the people involved, and a very rich amount of data that was harvested from that meeting. I'm going to cover some of the online technologies that are available today. I'm sure some of you are more familiar with some of them than I am. Who's here from Queensland? We have a few people, just a couple. Queensland was one of the early adopters of e-petitioning, government-sponsored e-petitioning. I think in 2002, shortly after Bristol, England, one of the first countries, essentially it's like a traditional petition process, except it's sponsored by the government. And some of the advantages there are you have direct communication with the petitioners, so you can in order to sign the petition, they typically have to provide you with an email, so you can directly respond to them. It allows you to control the process. Usually when you do e-petitions, you establish some thresholds. We need to have so many signatures in order to develop a response. And it demonstrates a real real openness to having some citizen input. Some of the it's sort of, I think it's become, in Queensland, it's just sort of become a part of the way that government is done there. The webcasting, I know lots of local governments in the U.S. at least, are beginning to webcast a lot of their public meetings, allowing people to track what's going on. I think not so many, but more should also be used. There's lots of really good engagement tools that go along, so people watching the webcast can participate, submit questions. We primarily do a lot of in-person, face-to-face meetings, so we get lots of requests from governors. Can we webcast the meetings so that people who couldn't otherwise be there can also participate? And it's an enticing option, but it's not as easily said and done because the experience is so different from the person who's in the room versus the person who is sitting at home and watching online. But it is a very helpful tool. There's a variety of tools, very cheap, very affordable, very easy to use. One of the online tools that I'm getting excited about because of how I think it's both supportive of the type of citizen engagement that we do around having citizens really engage and talk with each other. Google Hangouts. We get about 30 or 40 Google Hangouts around a particular issue in the fall of last year, and I think especially when you're very large geographies, you need to get people together without having to incur the cost of travel. It's become very one of the challenges we deal with online engagement is how to get people to really engage and be civil with each other. A lot of discussion forums out there that are not very constructive forms of engagement, but the ability to do this online, face-to-face, is very quickly sort of changes people's behavior in terms of their willingness to listen to each other, take each other seriously, and really participate in a constructive way. So excited about that. Polls and surveys, already mentioned sort of the poll everywhere. I'm sure a lot of you have done some surveys to gather input from constituencies on issues. One particular newer survey tool, Survey Gizmo, that really has the ability to sort of embed all types of media in it, so videos and other sort of, so it becomes much more, not just an opinion collection tool, but also an informative tool. You can embed video and other content in there to make it a very informative learning process, and so you're getting much more informed input from the participants. It's also a lot of place-based survey tools. Text is in. I don't know if it goes beyond the United States or not, but it's really geared towards getting input from people about the communities they live in as they're moving through their communities. You advertise and people, you can text us what you think should go on this building or what you think should go here. Ideation tools, which also known more as crowdsourcing. I like to try and call them ideation tools because crowdsourcing I think applies to a lot of what online tools are. They've become a very popular tool with local government as a way to collect people's input. If you're not familiar with it, people submit ideas and you can vote each other's ideas up or down in some cases, so that it becomes hopefully a very sort of brainstorming process with the most popular ideas rising to the top. There's a lot of local government sites out there with some very empty ideation tools, with the hope that you can just put this thing up and it's online and everyone's going to want to join in and participate, but it's not necessarily the case. One of your biggest challenges in online engagement is the back button. So it's very easy to get somebody to come and visit your website, but it's even easier for them to just click the back button and go away. So it needs to be incredibly simple, incredibly entertaining, for lack of a better word, in order to hold their interest long enough for them to, if you can trick somebody into coming to a public meeting, you've sort of got the captured audience, even while they're involved. But at a website, no one's gonna notice if they just close out and go away. So a lot more needs to be done to figure out how to use these tools in an effective way that you're really reaching a diverse audience, and that you're really keeping them, engaging them in a constructive way. So I think the tools are provocative in that way, and it's helping us see different ways of doing things. But I think, as earlier said, these technologies alone are not going to be solving our problems. It's us and everybody else in terms of what we're going to be doing with them. Social media. This is just a visual map of the social media world. It lists a couple over 200 tools organized into 26 different categories. There's always a lot of hope and promise put on social media that there are some real benefits to it. Fortunately, you don't have to know about all these tools. You only need to really focus on the most important ones like Facebook and Twitter, Tumblr, some of the others. But it's kind of like your public relations efforts. You have to do it. You have to have some presence. It is sort of your new public relations communication strategy. I think one of the advantages is that it allows you to be talking directly to your constituency, not mediated through the local newspaper or any other source. And it creates a possibility for some two-way dialogue. Lots of good examples of that Some were already mentioned, but it requires a lot of resources. You can't just put up your Facebook page, put up a question, and expect to get constructive feedback. You really need to invest some time and effort into using social media for what, if you want to primarily use it just as a communication tool to get the message out, that's fine. If you want to use it to try and collect input, you need to invest some time and effort into it. That's my last slide. Try to move quickly to allow some time for questions and comments, and I want to encourage not just questions, but I want to also give any comments that people have about citizen engagement and then how they perceive it, how they're utilizing it, what concerns or challenges they have it. Probably just to reflect back on some of my opening remarks and a lot of what was said in terms of the indeterminate future, the dilemmas to be managed rather than problems to be solved. Just close with a very, very short prayer that probably some of you are familiar with. So God grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things that I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Thank you.
Any questions for Daniel?
Jill Whitaker, Campbelltown Council. I was very interested to see that you were saying about the e-petition that Queensland Parliament has run. And I just wonder how you actually manage the ideas about privacy, which is quite strong, I think, in this country, with something like an e-petition, where there could also be the fear that once you put your name and address on an e-petition of that sort, there could be unintended and perhaps not so good consequences. So I wondered how that fits in, where it's very different to, say, Facebook, where it's a very different kind of medium, but to actually provide all that and to say I'm against this without any repercussions.
Right. And we're producing a report right now on e-petitions. We include Queensland as one of the case studies, along with Bristol and along with the White House in the United States implemented e-petitions. And so privacy issues, I think, is one of those dilemmas to be managed. It's the power of the internet depends a lot on people sharing some of their personal information and entrusting others to protect that personal information. It certainly does not always happen. It's e-petitions. It's an opt-in process, so nobody has to sign an e-petition. They can still use paper petitions. I don't know if there's also maybe a little bit of a generational change that people in the younger generations who've grown up with the internet world are potentially more comfortable with this sort of access to personal information. So I don't have a good answer for your question. I mean, there's, and I'm not directly involved enough in any of the e-petitioning work to know, it's something that's important, of course, to work on protecting people's privacy. But, sorry. But a good point.
Thank you. Any other questions?
Joanne Burgess from WA Local Government Association. I just wanted to ask you, Daniel, your views, or whether you have any particular views on time. A lot of, when we're talking about engagement, there's particular, sometimes with the public, they're wanting more instant results, and yet it's been my experience and probably others that time is something better results are when you take enough time to really source out those difficult to get to people to get a real feel for it. Have you got any opinions or actual evidence on time?
I think one important piece to note that at least occurs to me is the importance of being somewhat, everybody has lots of competing demands, like all of us. And yes, participation is good. Yes, we need people more involved in decision making and implementation. But I think as as the leaders in the community, you need to take some responsibility for being selective and strategic about how you engage the public. Because I've been in lots of cases where we're doing a 24-month community planning process, and we want to get lots of public engagement, so we set up opportunities to get involved every 2 or 3 months. And there's only a few crazy citizens who want to be that involved. So I think it's, what are the milestones, what are the important points along the way where it is really important to get, I think in terms of being responsiveness and timely, I think it's another approach is simply to say, is to be transparent about what you can answer now and what you cannot answer. So you're being responsive in a very timely way, but you're not rushing to any decision making or in that case.
Hi, Kimberly White, International Association for Public Participation. AmericaSpeaks is really well known for doing large-scale community events, forums this size and much larger. We see, and we have done those in Australia. There was Port Phillip was up there, and there have been a number of others. But there is also a movement in Australia for doing randomly selected panels. Adelaide's just announced one, Canada Bay in New South Wales as a council's just done one. I've been working at Bayside Council on another. I was just interested in what factors you believe would make you go for a large scale, let's get as many people in the room as we can, to a selection of people that might have a diversity of views. When you go big, when's it okay to be small?
Right.
It's a big point of discussion in Australia at the moment.
Yeah, and we've done something like that ourselves, where we've done some smaller events, were purposely not advertised, where we used Craigslist actually to sort of build and paid small stipends, very uncommon in our work, to get a sort of a small, diverse group of 40 or 50 people to participate. So I think there's definitely legitimacy for both. I think the need for sometimes doing something, whether it's large scale or just highly visible, is to try and change the public debate or the public dialogue that is occurring around that. So, if you get hundreds of people in a room to participate, or over the course of a process, the media will pay more attention, public officials will pay more attention, versus if you're really just wanting to get a good representative sample to give some input and guidance, then I think that there's some real legitimacy in going with the sort of smaller focus group approach. I think that there's ways you could also bring lots of attention to a smaller group. There's citizen juries and citizen assemblies where they find a small representative group, but then really empower them to take some responsibility for representing citizens and helping to decide what this issue is. So it has a lot just, I think, to do with the need for media attention and trying to change the larger dialogue.
Thank you, David. Jonathan Halls from the University of Ballarat. One of the issues in Ballarat is on a number of quite large public projects which the council has involvement with, is that forums will be called whereby people who have an interest in that issue come together. It's a process managed by council and announced by Facilitation. And there'll be a broad cross-section of people there, but in absolute numbers, compared to the size of the city, it might be relatively small. And so later on, when the information gained from that forum is called the credibility of that information is called to account and questioned. Do you have any comments on how legitimate you would see an open public forum where the public is asked to come along, and you perhaps get 100 people out of the city of 100,000, and then others would question the legitimacy of that?
Yeah, so one of the sort of obvious comparatives is to do a random sample sort of phone to gather public opinion. I think it's I don't think you'll be able to satisfy the critics sort of no matter what. I think that it's sorry, I'm struggling for a good response to your question.
Whether you would see the outcome of the forum as being legitimate and should be authoritative,
Right.
or that the voices of the knockers have really got a point, even though they chose not to attend or take an interest in this process, which was put forward by the elected.
Right. So I think that it should definitely be, the output of the forum should definitely be taken as informative, but not necessarily as, I wouldn't argue that it is authoritative. That it is still, you are, this is a representative democracy still, not as opposed to a direct democracy, and that it is, it is incumbent upon the elected officials to make the decisions that they need to make and to take into consideration whatever information they can gather from public input, whether that's through a 100-person forum or 1,000-person phone surveys. There's some advantages and disadvantages to each, or if you can do both. Or the power I think of the forum and the dialogue versus a representative sample, a large representative sample, is that people can actually form opinions and change perspectives over the course of the forum, whereas in a 1,000-person phone survey, you're really just getting their opinions without necessarily it being informed or insightful opinions. So.
Last one.
Marika Ryan, the City of Campbelltown from South Australia. I was just wondering, in your experience, what you would suggest would be a good way of getting the public engaged. We as a council from Campbelltown are very pro-engagement, and we consult in every possible way that we can. But in all of our efforts, and there are considerable efforts through advertising, through online connections, all sorts, for very important issues that we need public input, we often only get a handful of respondents. And our frustration lies in not being able to engage the community in all the areas that we try to engage in. And I was wondering whether you have any tips on what might be some surefire ways of getting public opinion.
No, I don't.
Thank you.
They sound like they've been over-consulted to death, actually. All right, can you please thank Daniel Clark from AmericaSpeaks?